It's okay. All right, all right. Perfection paradox. Perfection paradox. And nothing like a little start that wasn't perfect, but was way okay. We're recording a video here, perfection paradox, but it wasn't perfect. Everything wasn't, and that's okay. What a great example of how self-publishing is, how publishing is. I have a traditional publisher. I think it was a lot harder going back and forth with them as opposed to doing it myself and working with my insider team to get a book ready to go. There's a lot of negative connotation around the term, that, and I didn't realize it, of minimum viable product. My definition of that is a product that sells, and sells well enough, reads well enough, to sell the next book. That's a pretty high standard, isn't it? So if that's a definition of minimum, why would that have any kind of negative connotation? And then you write a better book next time, and a better book, and a better book. So I don't understand the negative. I think it's just people didn't want to get into the rat race of writing faster and faster, and I don't blame them. But that's not what it was about. It was about putting out the best book you could as quickly as you could. If you wrote a book and you're sitting on it for 2 more years thinking, well, I can make it better, you're pissing away a lot of money. You're wasting time. You're not thinking about that book for 2 years. You're putting aside, forgetting about it, torturing yourself because it's not perfect. Who determines perfect? The readers. The readers. So stop being your own greatest enemy and get out of your own way. What is your goal? If your goal is simply hobby writing, then you shouldn't be here. Because you're investing in yourself to come to this show, and we've never made any bones about this being for profit. Your words have value, and you deserve to earn money for those words. So by coming here, you've already said, I'm not a hobby writer. I want to be a professional author. I want to make money from my words. Oh my God, there's 42 and a half minutes left. I'm going to suffer. You want to make money from your words, and you deserve that. Maybe you have a deep-seated desire for accolades. Nobody ever told you were good enough when you were growing up, which means you're going to question everything you do. It's not going to be good enough. Once again, your readers. Readers will determine that. And when you publish, you put it out there for the world to see, for strangers to see. What if they think I'm an idiot? You know what? They think you're an idiot anyway. Is it your first day on the internet? Put it out there. Strangers will look at it. But what about those 9 people out of 10 who don't think you're an idiot, who are entertained by your story? What if it's 7? What if it's 7 out of 10? 70%, it's a passing grade. You went to school, right? It's a passing grade. Next time it'll be 80%, and next time after that, 90%. And then when you hit 99% read through, 99 out of 100 think this book's good enough that they're going to read the next book. Isn't that a win? I let that get me once. In 2017, I wrote a series called Terry Henry Walton Chronicles. It earned $250,000 that year, that one series. Book 6, one of our ARC readers, one of our pre-readers, gave me a 1-star and never said a word, but gave me a 1-star and said, oh, here's all these errors with the book. And I'm like, he's one of my proofreaders. Holy God, how could that happen? So I wrote book 7 with this 1-star review in mind. And when I ran it through the proofreaders, they sliced it up. They eviscerated me. They're like, we hate this. This is bad. And I had 22 hours to rewrite it before it was due to the editor. So I rewrote the whole book. I cut out 11,000 words, added 12,000 words. That was number 7, the torture volume, which you hated. And then that guy gave me a 5-star review on that book, which is my worst reviewed book of the whole series, because the readers were very cordial, very congenial. I let this one guy, out of thousands, get inside my head and upset hundreds of people who were previously happy. And then I published book 8. Guess who left the art team? This guy that gave me a 1-star on book 6. And I earned a 5-star from him on book 7. But it had half the reviews of book 6. So that just told me people didn't want to hurt my feelings and give me a bad review. They didn't like it. And then they picked back up with book 8, and they were there 9, 10, $250,000 later. Hey, it's a good series. But I let one person get inside my head. Play to the masses. If you get a 70%, that's a passing grade. You're making decent money. When you get to 90%, you're making good money. You get 90%. You have 2,000 fans who come back book after book. You're going to make good money. Unless you're publishing only 1 or 2 books a year. And then you need to get 10,000 fans on board. And that's okay. You can do that with a good book. A great book. But there's no such thing as a perfect book. Get out of your own way and let the readers help you decide, this is good enough. And then write a little bit better next time. And you deserve to make a few nickels off your book. If you write one book and you don't publish it, and then you revise it, and then you revise it some more, and I always note James Blatch on this, because he was very public about pulling his book back from publishing and getting close and pulling it back and getting close and pulling it back. He did that 3 years. I said, James, you know what you've done? You've almost written one whole book. You can't learn unless you get the book out there. And he wrote that book. Second one he wrote in a year. Third one he wrote in 6 months. And then he decided, here's what I'm doing wrong. You can't learn unless you get it out there and learn. Publishing in and of itself is unique. You cannot wargame it. You cannot take a 3D virtual headset and walk through everything that could go wrong. You actually have to publish and get the book out there. So if you're waiting for that perfect book because you're afraid of bad feedback, you're afraid of people not liking your story, people aren't going to like your story. Find your favorite author on Amazon and go look at their reviews of your favorite book. Find those 1 stars, and you'll figure it out that this is my favorite book of all time. And it'll have, if it's a big book, it'll have hundreds of 1-star reviews. People who are offended by the book, people who said this book is written by an amateur, this book is, yeah. And it's okay, readers, but then look at, there's 90,000 5-star reviews. So who cares about a couple hundred 1-stars? I think I have 125 1-star reviews, because you can pull up on Amazon, it gives you a gross number, and got like 125 total 1-star reviews. I should give up. That was my first book. That was my first feedback on keyboards. Don't quit your day job. Some asshole said that. Aren't you glad I didn't? Perfection. For me, personally, I mean, just seeing you guys succeed. And I don't want you to hold yourself up. You have to get the book out there. You have to get feedback. The difference between, and I figured this out in a session earlier today, the difference between a 3 and 4-star or a 3 and 4-figure author and a 5-figure author is the continuous improvement mindset. What do I need to do differently to sell more copies? And if your book 1, it sells well because you've got great marketing, and I go back to James Blatch, 3 books, they're good books, I liked them, but it was a very, very small audience. First book he hit with a ton of marketing, sold pretty well, but then the second and third book, not anywhere near as well, because all of his marketing was on book 1. Get it into the people's hands, and then who's picking up book 2 and 3? He's got a different series that he's working on now. More in a wheelhouse for a bigger audience. He would have never known that had he not published. It's a way to win. So continuous improvement mindset. Will you improve? Will that next book be better? And it doesn't matter that your first book took 20 years. The process is important. You have to learn the process. Second book will take you half the time or less. And then the third book, and if you took 20 years to write your first book, it didn't take you 20 years. You might have 150 hours in the chair typing away. Just those 150 hours were scattered across. But as you figure it out, you're more efficient with your time. 20 years to a year to 6 months to 2 months. And especially when you've got an idea that you love. You write it fast. You write faster. So why would writing fast be a bad thing? Surprise answer, it's not. You guys okay? You guys okay out there? Playing to a tough crowd. It's the after lunch crowd. Everybody ate well. It's Vegas. I probably even had beers. I wish I had a beer. Potential energy versus kinetic energy. The brick hanging off the edge of the roof. What kind of energy does it have? Zero. It only has potential energy. Until you kick it off and it falls down and hits the ground, you can't realize any of what energy it has. Kinetic energy. Publish or perish. You've heard that for academia. It's for us too. You know how much money you can make off a book you don't publish? Okay, we all roll a donut. You publish. I mean, as long as you're not publishing completely offensive material, you're the worst pirate I've ever heard of. But you have heard of me. And your first book, bad reviews, low sales. Okay. So you only have, 100 people. I sold 53 copies of my first book. And I think I sold 50 to my dad. So I only had 3 people who probably weren't going to come back and ever read a Craig Martelle novel ever again. So that's okay. Because you build a bigger and bigger readership. You try to find that biggest area. I get notifications on my watch. I always look because just to check to make sure it's my wife going taking Stanley out for a walk and not some stranger showing up at the house. Yeah, I lost my train of thought thinking of Stanley and Wendy walking around. But you have heard of me. What's that? What's the PI rate?
No, pirate. He calls you the worst pirate. It's saying in one of the Pirates of the Caribbean, Johnny Depp.
One guy says, you're the worst pirate I've ever heard of, and Johnny Depp. But you have heard of him. Yeah. There's no such thing as a technically perfect book. Look at something as simple as a Chicago Manual of Style. It's one way, and then you have other manuals of style. Oxford comma, do you use it or not? If you don't use it, you might have a user look at it and say, this book sucks. They don't know how to use commas. I mean, that's how moronic some things get. So why would you let that get you down? Because first, I can't fathom anybody who would ever not use the Oxford comma. But it's okay. How does that affect the story? And when you get into it, like if you use said every time they articulate in dialogue, if you always use said, who cares? As if it disappears into the background noise or you don't use dialogue tags, or if the story's good, none of that stuff matters. My good friend Michael Anderle, when Death Becomes Her, he wrote that book and he published it without it being edited. I read one of those versions. I'm like, boy, there's a lot of typos in here. You know what? I didn't care. Same thing with Jonathan Brazy's first book. I read it early in the life cycle. A lot of typo on every page. And it was such an incredible story, I bought the whole series from Amazon because it was a great book. Written by a Marine, hell yeah, it's Marine Corps right to the heart. Good stories. Readers will overlook a lot of those technical foibles. Don't get them in there if you don't have to. I mean, that's why we do hire editors when we can afford them. Perfect, right? Perfect is the story. And the story can even go off the rails a little bit, just until you kill the dog and then you're done, and you should be. So technically acceptable, like verb agreement, tense, That's why you hire a copy editor, just to make sure. So you don't switch past to present and back and forth. You don't switch first person to third person in the same paragraph. I mean, those are some standards that you really need, but any editor will catch that. And then you'll learn. Have your editor do it in Word, have your editor track the changes, and look at it. Continuous improvement mindset. That's how you get from 3 figures a month to 5 figures a month. Get better. But how do you get that feedback if you keep reading it yourself? You won't even notice that you're doing it because you see what you want to see. And that's why it's critical to get somebody else reading your book, because you can never make your book perfect, but other readers can make it pretty damn good. Minimally viable. That means a good story that people will keep reading and wait and want the next book. You can't compare yourself to your favorite author. You just can't. They've been doing this for a while. They might have a completely different process. When I wrote my first book, I'm like, oh, I want to write like Anne McCaffrey. Shut up. It's my first book. I did okay, but I don't write like Anne McCaffrey, and never will. As the more you write, the more you realize you have your own voice, and you're going to have that. And as you're tired, but the words are really flowing, that's your real voice. Anything else, it's more like work. If you're trying to sound like somebody else, that's too much like work. Sound like yourself. But make sure your verb tense agrees. Make sure your POV agrees. Amateurs practice till they get it right. Professionals practice until they can't get it wrong. After a time, you realize, I'm a professional author. I'm making money. And then if you go full time, that's professional. You have to make the money. You don't write a book, you don't get paid that month. Or 2-3 months down the road, whatever it might be. So then you jump into more marketing. Now you're spending more while not earning more, trying to make money. That's my plan for next year. A little more marketing. I only have 189 titles to work with, so I'll be okay. If I can get that first book to resonate, get the read through. I'm killing you. I'm sorry. Practice. Being an author is one profession where you get paid to practice. I got paid for those first books. I am still getting paid for those first books. And that is way, way cool. Because that's truly passive income. I started ads, running them, they're rolling. Passive income because of a book I published that's not perfect. And the readers are so congenial. Readers who come on board with my new stuff now, because I do a lot of promotions, a lot of advertising. They come on board with my new books, and they'll say, oh, I love this story. Oh, hey, you've got these other books. This sounds like a storyline I'd like. And they start reading it, and they're like, I love the story. I can see that you write better now, but this story was great. You can always sell a great book. And I thought about rewriting them, and I'm like, I'm just not up for it yet. Because it's 9 books, it's 600,000 words. I'm just not gonna rewrite it. I think we're gonna leave it like it is and let that story stand on its own and continue to stand. I wrote it with a lot of passion. First book, everybody remembers their first book, this great idea, and you're jamming away. As long as you don't have too many, a lot of people will make the mistake of having all the great ideas of their life and trying to put them in that one book. The good thing is I knew I was going to write more than one book, so I didn't overwhelm it with plot ideas and plot bunnies and characters, and it stays focused. It stays focused. And that's a good thing, and the readers have rewarded me for it. I've sold 130,000 copies of that series, so I'm quite pleased. When I say good enough, when I say minimally viable, I absolutely don't mean bad. I don't mean write a stream of consciousness in a week, get your 60, 70,000 words and publish it. Absolutely not. You can sell it. You have a great cover, a great blurb, a great premise. You can sell it, but you're never going to sell another book after that one once they start reading if it's just garbage. It has to be a good story. Do you have to be inspired when you write? I suggest that answer is no. You have to be inspired when you come up with your stories. And you have to be inspired enough to see the story all the way to the end. And then you have to go do the pedestrian work of writing that story. The action scenes will be great, the engagement scenes, but you have to set up that scene. You have to transition to that scene. Oh, come on, man, my own brother fell asleep on my class. I'm crushed. Poke him, poke him. Good enough doesn't mean marginally acceptable. And good enough for a book now is a hell of a lot better than a book written 8 years ago. Because I got paid for all this practice in between. I'd like to think that I learned something. Some 7+ million words published. And it's still the readers who determine good enough, who determine this is a good book. And the best thing you can hear, there's 2 things I look for in written reviews. Well written, can't wait for the next book. I get those things, that's a win. And of course the next review is like 2 stars, poorly written, avoiding the next book. I'm at the point where that doesn't bother me at all anymore. How many books did I sell? How many books did I sell today? How many did I sell yesterday? Okay. Yeah, I'm okay. Because I finally was able to internalize appealing to the 90%, appealing to the audience that's going to buy the next book, because they're the ones who are paying my salary. Why let this one star, who's not going to pay my salary moving forward, influence me? How many in here have day jobs? Okay. If your employer stopped paying you, would you keep going back to work? No. Don't work for people who aren't paying you. You have feedback that feeds your soul, the 5-star, this is a great book, man, great writer, love his stories. That's cool, that feeds my soul, as opposed to ones that make you better. This is a great story, this character seemed out of place. Let me take a look. I asked my insider team, what do you think about this? And they'll tell me, yeah, that seemed out, it was okay. And I always ask them, is there a place that it slows down? Is there a place that it seems out of kilter? And they highlight it. I don't need them to tell me how to fix it. Just say, here, this page here, this paragraph, or if you're Jim, delete chapter 8. Just tighten it up to like 0 words. Yeah. And there's feedback that makes you better. And why is Jim one of my insider team? Because originally when I started writing, they were reading my books just to read them, him and 3 others, and they were providing notes on the side. They weren't publicly, hey, I found typos in this guy's book. That's about them. But when he sends me a private note saying, hey, this seems off, or hey, here's a typo, then it's about me. It's about me making a story better for the future readers. And they're worth their weight in gold. Or Omaha steaks, however you pay. Perfect as a crutch. You hear that all the time. Oh, I'm not going to publish yet. I just, stop it. Stop it. How many of you here play golf? Good, good. Maggie Beal, well, you're from Ohio, of course. You live there now. You've got to play golf. Firestone, baby, Firestone. All right. There were too few of you. I'm failing in that people aren't playing enough golf. Golf is a very complex game. People pay their whole lifetimes to be half-assed at it, and they love it. If you were going out there the very first time you played expecting to shoot par, how misguided would you be? And why do you think writing is any different? There are people who go out there and have an unlimited number of mulligans and still not shoot par. That's your first round. This is your first book. I mean, if I write a really bad book now, the verb tense doesn't agree, POV shifts, the storyline is all over the place. With my 190th book, there's something wrong with me. I've had a stroke or something. because you learn. Because now it's innate. I know what to do. I can feel it. I can read back through it. Oh my God, I mean, it would slap me in the face. I don't need to sit on a book for a month and forget what was in there and then go back through it to see errors. I can see them right away. They jump out. So rewriting the same book over and over will not make you a better author. If you take nothing else away from this class, it's don't rewrite the same book over and over. Write it once. Edit it once, unless you're really all over the place and you recognize it, and then tighten it up. So your 100,000 word book, it might be a 60,000 word book, masquerading as this long book. But too many stray tendrils, too many plots that are going nowhere, too many open loops at the end. Oh, hey, I talked about this back in this chapter that was really interesting and never addressed it again. We've all read those books. Take that stuff out or answer it. And as an author, you figure out how to answer this stuff in a few words. I had a book that a co-author wrote, and it was the 5th book in the series. And it was an AI in an artificial body. Okay? And all of a sudden, this co-author, he wanted this AI in an artificial body to snarl, snap, and growl his dialogue all the way through the book. 70,000 word book where every bit of dialogue was snarled, snapped, or growled. I looked at that, I'm like, oh my God, this is almost unfixable. So I went to the very first page where the AI had adopted the body and was turned loose from the lab, and his parting words to the doc was, you know what? I'm going to snarl, snap, and growl everything I say because I can make an impact. And as he walks out the door, the doctor said, I don't think that's a good idea. And he's gone. That's how I fixed that. And then at the very end, I said, I'm not going to do that anymore. And I told my co-author, please don't ever do that to me again. Okay. Fixing things doesn't have to be as hard as you just have to know. Look, don't spend too much time rewriting the same book over and over. Are you researching exhaustively? If you know any historical authors, they have a tendency to disappear down rabbit holes for days, for maybe one sentence. Well, they don't like writing books, they like researching. Okay, as long as you understand that, that's cool. But if you really need to publish that book, learn what you need to know, when you need to know it, and move on. Otherwise, it's like watching Netflix, trying to find one string of dialogue that you like. I'm going to watch 4 hours of Netflix to get one string of dialogue. But you see what these are. They're excuses. They're excuses not to sit at the computer, not to transition, not to set up the scene, not to write the scene, not to engage in the dialogue, and not to bring it home. Master your fear. What are you afraid of? When you don't publish, what are you afraid of? I'm going a little slower here than I should. You have to understand where your fear comes from. Is it to be questioned? Is it for somebody to say, yeah, you're not good enough? Simple enough. Accept that your first book isn't good enough. But it is. Because it's good enough to tell you what to do in the second book, and the third book, and the fourth book. And if the first book is that bad, and you learn it, go back and rewrite it. This is the 21st century. So what? So what? You take a few minutes, rewrite the book, and then get back to it, and keep moving forward, because it makes you better. And also, if you're writing a 5-6 book series and that first book sucks, unintentional, I mean, you wrote the best book you could, they're not going to read books 2 through 6, even if those are much, much better. So you might have to go back and re-Wicker book 1, and that's okay. We can do that. How many readers have you alienated? Even if it's thousands, it's still okay. And it's not going to be thousands, your first book. It could be hundreds. And then if they got on your newsletter list, just say, hey, give me another chance. I'm rewriting it. I've heard what you said, and let's fix this. And I'll issue that second book for free. You bought the first book, so throw it on BookFunnel for a week before you publish or republish a second edition. Pull it down, republish, easy day. Best thing you do is get out of your own way. I always say there's two hats. You have your artist hat, and then you have your business hat. And as a business person, you have to have a product to sell. If that artist, a lazy bastard, isn't giving you the manuscript, there's nothing to sell. And you got to put on your business hat. Good enough. Stop sabotaging your path forward with, I'm not sure it's ready. Stop it. Have somebody else tell you it's not ready. Sometimes you're the worst judge of your own work. I would say most of the time you're the worst judge of your own work. The very best book I've ever written is my worst seller. People raged. It's a great book, according to me. So actually, I bought, this is me. You have to use the influence you have. So Mark Cameron is in my booth for the rave. And I just talked to him in the hall, and I'm like, hey, I have a book. I think it's the best book I've ever written. He said, I'd love to read it. Oh, thank you, man. Here you go. I got a copy for you. Because let's get his input. I mean, he writes, do you know who Mark Cameron is? He writes Jack Ryan for Tom Clancy. He knows what he's talking about with thrillers. Press publish, learn, and keep moving forward. Holy crap. Oh my God, 13 minutes. Writing when inspired, I already touched on this. Your plot and your story has to be inspired. And the cool watches, you can do a voice memo when you have that idea, capture it, because you're gonna forget it. Because if your mind is that active thinking stories and stuff, you're gonna forget, because you're gonna think of something else, something's gonna happen on the road, you're gonna see a moose run across the road, and you're like, oh man, that's cool, and it's gone. Use your voice memo, capture that idea. I was talking to Don. Don's did security for rock bands. Rolling Stones, some of their best songs were written in a stupor. Yep. He had a recorder by the bed, and his Keith Richards had a tape recorder, had his guitar. He'd wake up in the middle of the night out of a stupor, jam something, record it, go back to sleep, forget that he ever did it, and then come back, oh man, this is good stuff. Inspired. But then the pedestrian work of turning it into a song. Stringing together those in scenes, the idea of the plot twist, that's inspired. So 99% perspiration, it's kind of right. It's about 90%, and you're doing it by yourself. You're alone, at home, in front of your computer, at a coffee shop in front of you. It's just you and your computer fighting a war. Too many people say, I only write when I'm inspired. I'm sure that affects productivity. But it's your business. If that's that's fine. Don't let anybody ever tell you, you can't do that, you need to do. I'm telling you that probably you come up with your ideas when you're inspired, but writing's kind of a pedestrian process. Boy, I really hope I stay in the same POV today. I mean, that's not inspiration, that's perspiration. I write every day. Unlike golf, which you can kind of forget and your body forgets, writing every day is kind of a good thing. Muscle memory. Back to good enough. So you've got a few typos, you've got a few things that escaped your editor and your proofreader. If you've had a book edited and you've had proofreaders look at it and you don't publish it, what are you doing? Get that book out. Is that COVID? Get that book out. Get that book out there and get feedback from strangers. Because if you've targeted them right in the genre, write a great book, put it in the right readers' hands. If these are the right readers you think they are, then their feedback is important to make sure that this book is what you think it is. And thank God we no longer have print on demand or the offset, so you have to buy 10,000 copies of a book at once. This is why the trad pub pipeline is so long, because they do all this wargaming on the book to make sure it's good. So that's a year in quality control before they print 10,000 copies. They don't want 10,000 copies of a book that's not good, that has a lot of errors, because they just have to eat them. But with print on demand, how many copies are really going to be bad that are out there? And then you just do it again, fix it. Set realistic expectations for yourself. That write like Anne McCaffrey on your first book, stop it. Be realistic. How long do you think it took her? And how many editors did she have? How many publishers did she have that were pushing her in a certain direction to make sure that she wrote a good book in a way that needed to be written? It was her story, but you don't know how many other hands were in there helping her deliver that. Still her voice, not my voice. So it was unrealistic to think of that at the time. I think I could do better now, but I still can't write like her. It's just, I write different. Economy of prose. That's a cool term that makes me sound foofy. It just means I write shorter. Readers are the final arbiters. I saw the time. Trust the readers of your genre. Do not get Uncle Billy to read your book just because Uncle Billy says, hey, I've written a book. Hang on there, Uncle Billy. You want readers of your genre because they're separate tropes.
Quick question. If you're publishing and not, to your beta readers,
Yeah.
but if you put out there, is there a way to tell if your reviews are genre readers or not? Or do you just make that assumption if you're getting the same reviews?
Your keywords, your categories, you're going to assume, and especially after it's had enough sales, then you'll see the categories that Amazon makes it easy, the categories that they put it into.
Can you tell if you got the wrong people?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they'll tell you.
Well,
This is the worst horror book I've ever read. It's not horror. There you go. Yeah. You'll get it very clear. What's that? It's, yeah. Oh my God, this is foul, the profanity. Yeah, I turned that into an ad. I had a disclaimer in the blurb. And still, so much profanity. Yeah. So the wrong, yeah, it'll be very clear. Because also that's marketing. If you're only getting 5-star reviews, you're restricting yourself too much. You need to push the boundaries where you start getting 4 and 3-star. I get reviews, I usually don't read this genre. Ooh, how did that book get into this person's hand? But I liked it. Okay, I love you, man. But you can't have a conversation with that reviewer. But that's okay. Now you have to wonder, how did that book get into somebody? I don't usually read this genre. Well, great. Maybe we're getting word of mouth. That's a good sign. But if I get those and 1 star, now I'm off somewhere. And no, it's not easy to say, oh, okay, here, turn this off, click this switch. No, it's a lot harder to figure out why. Genre equals marketing. Genre is a marketing term. It's not, okay, this is cool for my book, I'm sub-niching down. Don't worry about any of that. It's readers who like this. That's all it is. And that's all TradPub is, I am convinced. TradPub is an email list of readers who like X. So when you submit for TradPub and they tell you they reject your book, it means it doesn't fit this very narrow channel of readers that they have. That's all. Doesn't mean you've got a bad book. It might be, but it doesn't mean that, not necessarily. I always target the biggest genre for readers of my stuff. Middle sci-fi, space opera is a huge genre. Those, thrillers. And listen to the readers, especially the ones who provide quality input of this character. When you talk, it's like a good conversation about the story and not, don't take just ignore the personal attacks. Go back to your day job kind of comments and this author sucks. I'll never read another book by this author. Okay, great. I'd like your money, but I don't need it. I want money from people who want to read the next book. Because readers are voting with their money, and they're voting more importantly with their time. $4.99, most people can wing that. But the 6 or 8 hours it takes to read your book, that's what they're really voting with. Because in that 8 hours, they can watch 4 movies, they can go goof around, they can play 2 rounds of golf. But they gave you that much of their time. The bottom line, we write for practice and we get paid for it. You have to get out of your own way and put yourself out there before strangers, but ask yourself, what am I afraid of from strangers? And if you want to be anonymous, you can. This is the world of today. You can write under a pen name, just show pictures of your books instead of your author photo. You don't have to show them who you are. You show a picture of your dog. You know, none of that. You don't ever have to out yourself. So what are you afraid of? Only you can answer that question. Me, I was valedictorian in my high school class. I graduated top 1%, University of Arizona. I graduated top 10% of my basic school class. I was always up here on performance. I got promoted 2 years below the zone to major. And publishing a book, I didn't know. 53 copies. Okay, I sucked. I didn't want to suck. I never sucked at stuff. But that wasn't it. I wasn't putting it in the right reader's hands. That first book that sold 53 copies, a traditional publishing house picked it up. They contacted me, an imprint of Simon & Schuster. And they were happy. They said, ooh, we usually don't take publications that are already published. And they asked me about, I said 50 copies of my dad and like 3 copies of strangers. They said, we'll consider that unpublished for our purposes. And that series was all-world bestseller in September. I published that first book in January. And that first book re-rolled in the Trad House, by September of that year in an ebook form. Oh, it was like lightning. Because it was all written. It was already written and good. The publisher really liked, they were expanding from zombie post-apoc to straight post-apoc without zombies. And I had a book and it was ready, and here it was, and they were making that move, and they didn't have the in the pipeline, they didn't have other manuscripts, so it was just serendipity. So all-world bestseller in September of 2016, a book that I could only push 53 copies by myself. Doesn't get any better than that. If I had quit after those 53, after that person on keyboard said, don't leave your day job, I did the cover myself in PowerPoint. Because I Googled, you can publish yourself on Amazon. Went over to Amazon, oh man, this is easy. Started my KDP account, did my tax info, and I got to do a cover, oh crap. Brought up PowerPoint, used a picture of myself, threw on some Algerian text. Oh, there's my wife, going out to take Stanley. And put it up there. Hell yeah, no wonder I only sold 53 copies. Blurb, you should buy this book because it's really cool, I wrote it. So don't hold yourself to an impossible standard. You had to get it out there. I wanted to get it out there because continuous improvement. I wanted to know what I didn't know. And you can't learn that unless you set the conditions for you to learn. And that meant publishing. Get better until you're great. That's all you can do. That first book, man, that's kindergarten. But you got to pass kindergarten before you go to first grade. That's all it is. Get paid for your practice. And if it's really that bad, pull it down. Throw it away. Well, don't ever throw anything away. Because later when you're a huge name, you say, you should see my first book. Oh, I'll pay for that. Great, I'll let you pay for that. 5, 4, 3. Oh, no, what's that? And one question. Yes?
You were talking about like re-uploading it with ebooks
Mm-hmm.
and how easy that is. The formatter that I use said, industry-wise, formatters will fix typos for you and re-upload it. Is that?
Ooh. Here's my
Should I repeat it?
formatters will fix typos for you. Version control and also being in control of your business. I used to do that. I hired a formatter to format my stuff. And then he went on vacation, had a typo, wanted it fixed, and then I sent him stuff, and all of a sudden, he got out of that business. And now I've got my version that has typos that he fixed, and they're not fixed in my version. So if I'm gonna fix them in both places for version control for my legacy, because when I pass away, I wanna hand off a file that's the latest perfect edition in Word. So the only way I could do that is if I fix them, and if I fix them, I might as well just republish. So I publish all my ebooks out of Word. So they're the latest, greatest. So I use a template. I use the exact same template every book and publish in Word. And I do it myself. I got Atticus because I don't use an Apple. But I would say formatting your book, absolutely do it yourself. Learn to do it yourself, because otherwise you are a slave to Mother May I.
Okay,
Mother May
thank
I
you so much.
change this, fix this typo. Mother May I, and sometimes they're not going to be available. Oh, I'll be available next month. Yeah, don't accept that.
Okay.
Not to drive them, but don't accept that for yourself. So I'm sorry if I'm putting formatters out of business, but there's a real reason for why I format myself.